a quiet turning point in constitutional law. While most Americans were focused on political headlines, court cases, and culture wars, something remarkable happened in the marble halls of the Supreme Court. In a rare moment of complete agreement, the justices made a unanimous 9-0 decision. This wasn't about some small technical detail or an unimportant rule. It was about a really important question that gets to the heart of personal freedom. This decision might not be directly about the Second Amendment, but for anyone who carries a gun, owns one, or just cares about how far the government's power can go, this ruling has big consequences. The case of Barnes versus Felix. What happened? At the center of this case is a tragic situation that quickly got out of control. Officer Robert Felix Jr. stopped a man named Ashtyn Barnes for what he thought were traffic violations. The situation quickly got worse. The officer told Barnes to get out of the car. Barnes opened the door and seemed to cooperate at first, but then suddenly tried to drive away. Officer Felix instinctively jumped onto the car's doorframe. Within 2 seconds, he fired 2 shots into the car. Barnes was fatally hit. The whole thing, from the car moving to the fatal shot, lasted about 5 seconds. After the incident, Barnes's mother sued Officer Felix, saying that her son's Fourth Amendment rights were violated by excessive force. The main question was, did Officer Felix act lawfully in that moment of perceived threat? And even more importantly, what legal rules should courts use to decide this? The moment of threat. A problematic standard lower courts, especially the Fifth Circuit, had for a long time used a rule you could call the moment of threat standard. This means courts would only look at what an officer did at the exact moment force was used, not what led up to it, and not what happened afterward. If the officer felt threatened in that split second, using a gun was okay. Period. That's exactly what happened in this case. Both the District Court and the Fifth Circuit sided with Officer Felix, saying that the 2 seconds he was holding onto the moving car justified using deadly force. But this narrow way of looking at things had a big problem. It ignored the whole picture. Questions like, what made the officer jump on the car? Could the situation have been calmed down earlier? Or, were Barnes's actions really dangerous, or were they misunderstood? Weren't allowed under the moment of threat approach. And that's exactly what the Supreme Court found troubling. The Supreme Court's landmark decision. In a unanimous decision, written by Justice Elena Kagan, the court threw out the moment of threat rule. Instead, the justices decided that cases of excessive force under the Fourth Amendment must be judged based on all the circumstances. This means the whole interaction matters. The officer's choices that led to using force are important. Courts have to weigh whether the force used was objectively reasonable from the perspective of a reasonable officer on the scene, not looking back at it later. The opinion clearly said that looking at all the circumstances doesn't have a time limit. Things that happened before can show why an officer might see unclear behavior as threatening or harmless. In short, the context is key. So, this ruling sets a new example for how excessive force is judged. This affects every interaction between police and citizens across the country. Why gun owners should pay attention. You might be wondering what this has to do with the Second Amendment. The answer is, a lot. More and more law-abiding gun owners are finding themselves in tense situations with the police. Maybe it's a traffic stop where you tell the officer you're legally carrying a gun. Maybe it's a visit to your home because of a tip or a mix-up. In these kinds of situations, force can quickly get out of hand. Until now, courts mostly ignored what led to that force, focusing only on the last second. This ruling changes that. It lets courts look at the full story, including whether the officer misunderstood a legal action as threatening. For gun owners, this could mean the difference between being wrongly blamed for a deadly misunderstanding or having a court recognize that your rights were violated. The Fourth and Second Amendments are now more connected than ever before. A new legal framework. The totality of the circumstances. The Supreme Court didn't just get rid of a narrow rule, it set up something better. By emphasizing all the circumstances, the court created a clearer and more balanced way to judge police use of force. This means both sides of the story, what the officer saw and what actually happened, must be considered together. Here's what's required now. Courts must look at the whole series of events, not just the last few moments. Police officers can no longer just say they felt threatened as a reason for using force if that threat was caused by their own earlier choices. Past interactions, behavior patterns, verbal cues, and attempts to calm things down will now be important evidence in court. This changes everything. Self-defense cases, wrongful shootings, and encounters with law-abiding gun owners will now be judged based on this. It's a standard built on fairness, giving new meaning to the constitutional depth of the Fourth Amendment in modern policing. Impact on federal and state courts. This wasn't just a scolding for the Fifth Circuit. It was a direct challenge to how several federal appeals courts have handled excessive force cases for decades. Some districts had adopted variations of the moment of threat rule, while others applied broader standards inconsistently. With this unanimous Supreme Court decision, all courts are now on notice. Lower courts will have to re-evaluate ongoing excessive force cases. Appeals of past rulings based on narrow standards could be reopened. Future cases will lean heavily on the Barnes v. Felix ruling as a precedent. To be clear, this case is reshaping federal court law in all 50 states. Lawyers representing victims of police misconduct now have an argument approved by the Supreme Court. Context is required by the Constitution. This gives new legal life to cases once thought unwinnable. The reality for gun owners. If you're a gun owner, here's the reality. You're statistically more likely to interact with the police than most other citizens. Whether it's a traffic stop, a range check, a hunting license check, or a knock on the door, the stakes are high. What happens in the first few seconds of an encounter can change your life. This decision makes it possible for citizens to challenge wrongful actions without being silenced by narrow legal rules. It gives lawyers the power to argue for your rights on a broader, fact-based foundation. It requires judges to demand more accountability from officers who unnecessarily make situations worse. This doesn't make every use of force illegal, but it raises the legal bar for justifying it. Gun owners, especially those who carry concealed or openly, now need to understand that all of their behavior counts, but also the officer's behavior leading up to an incident. This legal balance was long overdue. The connection between the Second and Fourth Amendments. For years, constitutional debates treated the Second and Fourth Amendments as separate things, one about gun rights, the other about searches and arrests. But this ruling blurs that line in a good way. Here's how they're connected now. The Second Amendment protects your right to carry a gun. The Fourth Amendment protects your right not to be unlawfully searched, arrested, or hurt because you are legally carrying a gun. Think about it. Your right to carry guns is only truly safe if courts also agree that you shouldn't be punished for using that right. This decision means that legal gun ownership can no longer be used as an excuse for deadly force, unless the whole situation truly calls for it. That's a shield every gun owner should understand. And it marks a historic joining of constitutional rights. Outlook: the path forward is important. Legal experts are already calling Barnes v. Felix the Miranda ruling for use of force cases. A decision that fundamentally changes how the Constitution protects you in interactions with the government. What's next? Police training will have to change. Officers now need to consider that their actions before using a gun might be judged in court. Gun rights advocates have a new legal tool to defend citizens who were wrongly targeted in unclear situations. States and cities might face new lawsuits, policy reviews, and pressure to update police practices to fit this broader interpretation. By making a unanimous 9-0 decision, the court sent a clear message. This isn't a political issue, but a constitutional one. It could be the start of a new era where police powers are limited, rights are upheld, and citizens are respected according to the law. Why this decision matters to all of us. This ruling might not be trending on cable news, but it should be. Because whether you're a gun owner, a civil rights activist, or just someone who wants a fair justice system, Barnes v. Felix changes the game. It's a confirmation that your rights don't end when you're stopped, questioned, or confronted. The Supreme Court's message is clear. Constitutional rights require context, not convenience. If you ever wondered if a court would truly look at all the facts in a controversial gun case, there's now hope. If you worried about being misunderstood in a tense moment while legally carrying, there's now a precedent that protects you. This decision marks an important step toward a justice system that takes both individual rights and public safety seriously, and one that recognizes true justice can never be achieved without a full understanding of the context.